Okay, so we're back on. Okay, we are back on. Carol Fitzgerald, hello. So thank you everyone. Welcome back, Facebook Live. The Library Love Fest team is here again to talk about more books. So we hope that you're following along with us. One thing I forgot to mention when I mentioned our book club girl, their next event, which is taking place on November 14th with Lena Dillon, author of Mercy House, and Susan Wiggs, is that our own Carol Fitzgerald from the Book Report Network will be the moderator. So nobody talks books like Carol Fitzgerald. So people agree. So we've talked about Facebook Live and our podcast. So all of this, again, you can find on the handout. We have so many books to talk about. We will hopefully get to all of them. If we don't, we'll record them and put them on Library Love Fest. We'll figure it out. But we'll go quickly now and try and get back on track. So which one are we up to? Wife Stalker.
Wife Stalker.
Wife Stalker. I didn't even have anything to eat or drink. Probably the reason why I'm acting like that. Okay, Wife Stalker, Liv Constantine. We know Liv Constantine, the last Mrs. Parrish, and they are amazing. That is a sister writing team, as most of you probably know. So the Wife Stalker has a lot of the elements that the last Mrs. Parrish had. You know, that very twisty psychological. Who read the last Mrs. Parrish? Right? Okay, so how great was that book? I mean, just so juicy, and yes, they're applauding. My God, I love that. I love that book so much. And they're back to that territory. The last time I saw you was I think it was a bit of a departure for them, but no less enjoyable. It was just sort of one of those, wait, who did this? It's a mystery, and I love that. And I just, you know, I'm stuck on these guys now. I think that they are terrific writers, and they just know how to do it right. They're smart, and they keep you engaged, and they're funny, and these characters are nutty, and it's just so good. But yeah, so I love The Last Time I Saw You, and I love The Wife Stalker. We're just back where we were with The Last Mrs. Parrish. So this one is about a woman who is a new resident in Westport, Connecticut. Some of you back there in Connecticut, yes. Hello, it's about you. No. So this is Piper, and she's very attractive, and she's a 30-something, and she's the owner of the Phoenix Center, which is a rehab and wellness space. And so she's decided to start her life over there. So we already know something's gone on. Then she meets this man, Leo, who's this very handsome, successful lawyer. The only problem is that he's married, but that's not going to stop sister. So, and meanwhile, his wife, Joanna, is waiting at home for him, and he's been in this real funk. And when he starts to, she's been really supportive and wonderful and hoping that he gets out of this funk. And when he does, he's a little too happy. And she's starting to think there's a third party involved here. And she's right. And soon enough, he's leaving her. But his wife does some digging and finds out that Piper is not all that she appears to be, and that she has a big, deep, dark secret. And it's deadly. So, twisty, fun, juicy, The Wife Stalker, Liv Constantine. Coming out May 19th.
All right, Swimming in the Dark by Thomas Jodorowsky. This is a heart-wrenching debut set against kind of the fall of communism sorry, I keep on forgetting about the jacket. So this is about two young men. So you have university student Ludwig and Janice, and they meet in the summer camp when they're both kind of like graduate students. They're coming into adulthood, and they quickly fall in love with each other. And it's like this hot summer. They're traveling around. They're at this summer camp, and then they explore the countryside together. And it's, you know, one of these classic like whirlwind romances. They're coming into themselves and really, again, becoming adults. But these two return home, and they are quickly pulled apart once they return to Warsaw. So Janus is charismatic, and he quickly rises up the political ranks. And then you also, with Ludwig, he is more into kind of like the counter-protesting and on the ground, seeing the economic disparity between, government workers and those on the ground, and he is really fighting for change. And with Warsaw at this time period, this is like, there's violence, there's uprising, and these two quickly find themselves on opposite sides of the line drawn, again, between the ruling class and those on the ground. So it's thought-provoking and painful at times. It's really tender. We're kind of positioning this as Brokeback Mountain meets Madonna in a fur coat. You can think of like the success of Call Me By Your Name. There's a real desire for these LGBTQ kind of coming-of-age stories and really getting into the heart of their experience. So this is coming April 28th. That's Swimming in the Dark.
Okay, next is Something She's Not Telling Us. So Darcy Bell, you probably know her from A Simple Favor. The movie just came out with Anna Kendrick and Blake Lively. And I just heard people that go and they come out and they're just like, whoa, like what happened? It's such a good thriller. But this one's just as campy and over the top as that one. This is her second book. And I said the title, right? Something She's Not Telling Us. But there's this big pull for domestic thrillers, Big Little Lies, and this is in that vein. And we have two women, Charlotte and Ruth. Charlotte has everything. She owns a flower shop. She has this husband that she loves and a daughter, Daisy, who's 5, and she's just living life. She loves it. She kind of has a weird relationship with her mom and her brother. Her brother's a little closer than her mom, but her mom is a little off the rock sometimes. And Ruth is now Rocco, Charlotte's brother's new girlfriend, and he's bringing her around, and she thinks something might be off. We don't know about Ruth. But you go in between the two stories, and you get to hear Ruth's story. She didn't have much of her mom left her with her grandparents when she was young, and so she just really hasn't had, she's been kind of sewing her pieces of her life together, and finally she kind of has a quilt made of it. She has this great boyfriend, and all Charlotte's thinking is like, Rocco always brings some crazy people home. Like last one was a kleptomaniac. Like, who is this new person? But she seems okay. But then Daisy needs to be picked up from school, and Daisy goes missing. And she knows Ruth took her. And Ruth is thinking, well, I love Daisy. I want to be part of this family. Maybe I should take her out for a great day. And so all these secrets come out, and, they don't like each other. It's so fun, and just it asks, is everyone who they say they are? And there was a great an EW cover reveal, and they said in the reveal, like, another deliciously suspenseful novel that promises to satisfy fans of Belle's first book, and perhaps then some. So everyone's really excited about this one. And that's coming in April.
Say Your Word, Then Leave. This is the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi and the Power of Truth, and this is by Karen Attiah. This is a behind-the-scenes account of Jamal Khashoggi's final year at the Washington Post. So in September 2017, he filed his first piece with the Washington Post. Karen Attiah was his editor there, and the column was about his decision to go into exile and speak out about Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and it went viral, and Khashoggi became a regular columnist for the paper. He dreamt of an Arab world free from tyranny and oppression, and he made it his mission to demystify Saudi Arabia for a global audience and to urge Saudi government to govern wisely. And a year later, he was dead. This is the story of the Post's involvement with trying to uncover what happened, pretty much knowing what happened, unraveling this stranger-than-fiction story about his disappearance and murder and trying to find the answers. And it reveals Saudi Arabia's ties with America in Washington, D.C., Wall Street, and most notably to the close ties to the Trump administration. So this is a fight for justice, and it's also about their relationship, their friendship, their growing friendship. They were very different people, but they were very close, and so it's this really incredible video online when she is talking about her friendship with him and the struggles that he had, and his he was bent on on doing the right thing and his convictions, and it's just a disgusting, horrible thing that happened. And so she has won several awards as a result of the writing that she's done on behalf of him. She won I think it was the Polk Award, and she's a brilliant writer, and she's a brilliant editor, and so is he. And so this is an important book. Khashoggi was named Time's 2018 Person of the Year for his trailblazing work, for being, quote, a guardian of the truth, and Atia attended the ceremony to accept the award on his behalf. And she's made it her mission to carry his torch and keep his story alive. She did receive the 2018 George Polk Award for her writing about the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, and she was named the 2019 National Association of Black Journalists of the Year. So she's you can see her on she's on the Washington Post's award-winning list, and she's a Fulbright scholar. She's brilliant, and it's a very unfortunate thing that happened, but I think that this book is a very important book to bring things to light. So that is Say Your Word, Then Leave, by Karen Atia. I had that one piece of paper that I wanted to explain the title, and now I can't find it. If I do find it, I'll let you know. Oh, here it is. I just wanted to say what this meant, because I didn't know myself. It's a translation of a quote that Khashoggi had on his Twitter profile in Arabic. Karen Atia explained why she chose this for the title. She said, "It just struck me as a fitting example of his work and life, about how much he believed in the power of free speech, and even though he has left us, his words will never die." Okay. Next. Very different book, Switching Gears, My Life as a Villainess by Laura Lippman. I know, very cool. This is a collection of her recent essays that explore everything from being an older mother, her life as a reader, her relationship with her parents, her friends, her husband, David Simon. She talks about her childhood and her school years, her career as a newspaper reporter, the challenge of balance. There's 16 essays, only 3 have appeared in book form before. There's one called Game of Crones, which I think is hilarious. Which was published online in May of 2019 and has over 100,000 unique views. There's another one called Men Explain the Wire to Me. Her husband is the writer of The Wire. It's very She's very funny. And one of her books, And When She Was Good, was chosen as one of the core collection's star titles, which is a decision made by librarians and presented by EBSCO. And anyway, so she's just wonderful. There's going to be a hardcover edition, a library hardcover edition of this book, and she's just so smart. She's just brilliant, and we love her. So that's a collection of her essays. My Life as a Villainess, but she's not a villain. She's actually lovely.
And you have to listen to her NPR interview with Fresh Air. It's so good.
She's sassy.
East of Hounslow by Khurram Rahman. So this is a 360 title. We're bringing it over from the UK. This has a ton of internal buzz. Actually, our academic colleagues, Kim Raycon, who I think probably met downstairs, is in love with this book, as is Diane Burrows, who leads the academic library department. This is a fast-paced, really smart kind of urban thriller that takes place in London and follows Jay. And Jay is a small-time drug dealer who lives in West London. He doesn't have too big aspirations. He lives at home with his mom. He did just buy a new BMW, which he's psyched about. He's a character who's like smart, but incredibly flawed. He really is someone you love following through this. But what happens with Jay is the MI5 have been following him, and they think he's the man they need. Even though he seems like a fish out of water, he is going to go undercover and become a jihadist and try to get to the bottom of this looming terror plot in London. And so you follow Jay and all his mishaps because he's he's underprepared. He doesn't think he has the skills necessary until he does to get to the bottom of this. It's so fresh and funny and just, again, pacey. I can't stress enough just how quick this read goes. Very much kind of like Breaking Bad, Four Lions, that territory. And I have a great quote here. So much UK praise. The Times Literary Supplement says, combining humor and tragedy is one of the hardest literary challenges, but Khurram Rahman succeeds. there's just pages and pages of buzz for this. So I'm really excited. We don't have a jacket yet. I think we're just trying to capture the energy of this book, and I think that energy is just full of it. So it's going to be a start of a new series. We're really excited about it. So that's coming a little bit, July 28th of next year. All right. This is such an exciting piece of nonfiction, Kid Quixotes by Stephen Hoff. So Stephen Hoff is actually based in Bushwick, Brooklyn, which is my haunt, and he's a Yale-educated teacher who suffered a mental breakdown and found out that he suffered from bipolar depression. He was looking for a way to not only deal with his own illness, but how to kind of connect with kids who have problems, finding their voice with all the noise that's around. And he founded Still Waters in a Storm, which is this after-school program that he developed using a variety of methods that he'd learned from AA meetings, Quaker prayers, psychotherapy, even Buddhist meditation circles. And basically what the purpose of this whole program is to give these kids space to be fluid and understanding and to be exposed to a whole different, swath of art and just intellectual learning. And this eventually developed into translating episodes of the classic Don Quixote from English to Spanish with his students. And they basically created this traveling musical with these kids that Stephen was teaching, The Traveling Adventures of Kid Quixote. And they came into the office. I didn't get to see them. Lainey, I know you did.
It was awesome. Can I say one thing
Yeah,
about it?
yeah,
What was really cool is so he would bring the kids out and they all collaborated on it. And at one point he was like, wait, hold on. We're using this word, but should we use would or could? And he let all the kids vote, and 2 of them gave their reasoning, and then he let the audience vote, and he was like, I put this in the play specifically because we couldn't decide, and we wanted to show you what our process is, and it was just like freeing and like giving these kids agency to like have a voice. He was listening to them. It was so cool.
Yeah, and there's a documentary in works about this program. It's just really kind of groundbreaking, fascinating stuff that he's doing with these kids. And it's basically telling the story and how he engaged. So it's, part memoir, part prescriptive, just fascinating. We're also going to be publishing a Spanish language edition of this in January, I think alongside actually. So this is coming April 21st. We'll have a Spanish language edition. Just a really fascinating story. So we're really excited. And you can see there's also going to be a young readers edition. So that's Kid Quixotes.
Okay, next. Talia Hibbert. We have Take a Hint, Danny Brown. Fans of Get a Life, Chloe Brown. Everywhere we went, everyone, like so much buzz for her first book in this series. Everyone loved it. It was own voices and inclusive. Character had a disability. And so this is the second in the series. There's going to be 3. It all revolves around 3 sisters. And they are grandchildren of a famous singer. So they have like a lot of wealth and privilege, and all of the heroes are always, working class, and so that's a trope kind of flipped on its head a little. But in this one, I also should point out that everyone loves Talia so much, but she has just made something really special with the first book, and I can't wait for this one. It's very funny and voicey, and it's just like rom-com at the pinnacle. It's so fun. But she is really well known for writing like sexy, diverse romances because she believes that people of marginalized identities need honest and positive representations. And I say that only because that is one thing that the romance community is talking about constantly. So it's nice to see it played out in this, and also its own voices and inclusive. It's got LGBT. So this one, so excited. Story, really quickly, the second sister story, Danica Brown. So Danny, she's an academic, and she's kind of, on her own, doesn't really want that. But then a fire drill goes wrong, and somebody saves her, the security guard that works there. And then and she's kind of like, okay, well, I'm not looking for anything serious. But then it goes viral, this video of him saving her. And now she has to deal with people like shipping, as they say, Dr. Rugby, because he used to play rugby. It's very British too, which is fun. But then he's just determined to get into her. She's just really realistic, and so he's trying to make her have some fun. And there's so much buzz for this one. Very excited. The first one got 3-star reviews from P.W. Kirkus Booklist, and there's only great things from this. So we'll see. Hopefully, maybe there'll be more. We don't know, but. Take a Hint, Danny Brown, and that comes in June. And then just really quickly, we have, it's on the back, another page of your handout, but this is rom-coms that are coming. So we have so many. We have a new Sally Thorne, if you're really into. I love her so much. Meg Cabot, and like Tessa Bailey. Really fun. You have all that on your handout, but we just wanted to show you that we have lots coming. Lots of fun covers, bright and pretty. Okay, well, we're a little
Reach.
behind.
Buckle up. We got
Gotta
a
eat
lot
again.
of books. Yep.
And the slide says,
Lunch coming 2020.
okay, is it me? Oh, my
It is
goodness.
you.
Oh, sorry, I got wrapped up in lunch. So, we have, this is Amy Malloy. If I can find my papers, that would be really nice. Okay, well, here's her picture. Somebody can work on that. Amy Malloy, you probably know her from The Perfect Mother. That was really a big one. Library Reads, and also Book of the Month. Everyone really loved it. She's great at writing thrillers, great twist, and that one is about like a mommy brigade in Park Slope. So she just kind of does really fun subsets of the genre. And in this one, and also Kerry Washington's working on producing the movie of A Perfect Mother. But this is her second follow-up, and we're really excited about this one. It really subverts the psych, suspense genre in smart and thrilling ways. She wanted to write something more in the vein of like Gillian Flynn and less like the griplit successful ones, and she really did it in this one. And she's been called the master of clever misdirection from Kirkus Reviews. So in this one, you have the story of Sam Stalter. He's going to move back to Orlando, New York, and he has this new wife, and he's just going to go live this perfect life. But then they look like they have the perfect life from the outside, but then his secrets are exposed, and he goes missing. But we don't know where he went. And then they start to decide that maybe the truth is a little more complex and shocking. They have a lot of assumptions of where he could be. And this is just really showcasing her ability to really change norms and expectations, especially in thrillers, because I think a lot of people think they know what's going to happen. And there's an unexpected twist. She's got a trademark twist in there. But we're really excited about her second one. And I'm sorry I don't have a jacket to show you, but it's coming in June.
All right. Have You Seen Me by Kate White. We love Kate White. She's probably been to a few of your libraries out there. Yes, I see you back there. She's a really just smart domestic thriller author. She's a former editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan. If you've seen her speak, she's just like so poised and smart and put together. She does standalones, and then she does the Bailey Weggins series. And this is a standalone from her that follows a finance journalist, Allie, who wanders into her office thinking it's another day at work, only no one recognizes her, and she quickly learns she hasn't been there, she hasn't worked there in 5 years, and she's operating under this very like, kind of devastating, disassociative fugue state. And what she learns is not only has she not realized 5 years has passed since she last worked there, she can't remember anything about the last 48 hours. And this is kind of like this ticking clock story where Allie is facing danger. She doesn't really understand what's happening or why, but she's trying to piece it together before her time runs out. Pacey, very smart, and again, we love Kate White. She's based in New York, so if any of you are dealing with programming, wanted to come to your library, I'm your guy. Kate's your gal, just let me know and we'll see what we can do. We're also publishing a library hardcover edition, so that is coming April 28th.
Okay. Beverly Jenkins, On the Corner of Hope and Main. This is in her Blessings series. She is an NAACP nominee and a USA Today best-selling author. And this are you all familiar with Beverly Jenkins and her series? She's terrific, and she loves libraries and speaks at them all the time. So if anybody's interested in having her come to your library, she's been to the Texas Library Association. She's terrific. And so this is set in this is the series that's set in Henry Adams, Kansas, and it's about the townspeople are sort of at a crossroads because the mayor has decided that after 4 years he's going to step down as mayor and let somebody else pick up the mantle, and so there are several people who want the job, and so there's lots of conflict, and then there's thrown into all of this conflict about lots of opinions on who should be the best candidate. There's also the local townsman, Mal July, who decides to make reparations for damage he's caused to people that he's portrayed for various reasons that you find when you read the book. But it's very rich historic backdrop. It's got these great characters. It's got a lot of depth, and we've just signed 2 more books in this series. And some of the citizens in this fictional town of Henry Adams are descendants of characters from Bev's historical romance, Night Song. That was her first one. So, as I say, she just spoke at the Epps Memorial Library in Louisiana, at the Woodson Regional Library in Chicago. She's absolutely terrific. She's so lovely, and we just love that we have her on our list. This is a wonderful series for us. And next is
Mwah.
you.
Okay, A Good Marriage, Kimberly McCreight. And then here she goes. Had my papers in order that time. So you might know Kimberly from her really successful book, award-winning Reconstructing Amelia, and this book is reminiscent of that, so that's exciting because everybody loved it so much. But this one really takes an inside look on suburban life, but it's a little more emotional and psychological than like a thriller, so maybe a little more literary, but it does have that kind of thriller element in there, psychological suspense. And domestic, that's the hot word too. We've said it a lot today. And so in this story, we have a federal prosecutor, and she just thinks she has this great marriage, but then it just falls apart suddenly. Maybe not so suddenly. I think she's starting to look back and see where the cracks were forming. And then she gets a phone call from Rikers Island, and her friend, Zach Grayson, is in trouble. His wife, Amanda, has been found dead at the bottom of the stairs in their Brooklyn brownstone. And he's the primary suspect. Husband always did it. Just kidding. And so he's calling for help. They're really great. She's been friends with them a long time. And then she's really pulled into their marriage and how it was not always what it looked like because she thought it was great. And she really juxtaposes like her marriage along with this. And it just asks the question of what is a good marriage? But all of the quotes, like I won't read them, but they all say can't put down, can't put down. So this one we're really excited about. Kimberly McCreight, Good Marriage, and that's in May. And then next is The Moonglow Sisters by Lori Wilde. We have probably a lot of Lori. If you're a romance fan, you're probably a fan of Lori Wilde. And she's beloved. She's won so many awards. She's like a 3-time RWA Rita finalist, 4 times been nominated for the Reader's Choice Award. Like, everyone loves her so much. She's a big romance writer. But this is her debut on the William Morrow paperback side, and we're looking really to break her out in a way that Jill Shalvis or like Susan Wiggs like really move into this other format, and we're excited to see that. But if you like Debbie Maycomer, but like a little more spice, this one's for you. And it all revolves around 3 sisters. They were brought up by their grandmother in the Moonglow Inn, hence the name. And so a wedding day tore them all apart because I won't give it away, but essentially like one might be leaving for a significant other of the other. But they all go their separate ways, and they're brought back and one last time, and so they all come together. It's really her trademark style of like unforgettable and of storytelling and like family, betrayal, love, all the second chances. It's really wonderful, and we're excited to see what this new format will do for her. But she's still going to do her romance novels. You just have one every other time. So, Moonglow Sisters by Lori Wilde, and that's in March.
Okay, The Astonishing Life of August March by Aaron Jackson. I love this jacket and I love this book. It's very sweet. It's very quirky. It's set in New York City, post-war, and it is about a young boy. Well, first we meet the mother, who is a stage actress, and she goes out on stage and she does her thing, and she comes backstage and she gives birth to a baby, and then she goes out with her friends. Puts that baby in a basket full of soiled blouses in her theater dressing room, and he's raised by the laundress who works at the theater. And she doesn't know what to do with him. She actually finds a little bit of champagne and gives him that as his first drink. It's absolutely nuts, this book, but it's so much fun. He's basically feral but intellectually sophisticated and a true child of the theater. He could recite Shakespeare before he knew the alphabet. He's just, did you ever read Be Frank with Me, which is such a wonderful, wonderful book? Love that book. Be frank with me. If anybody wants it, email me. I'll send it to you. It's so good. It's like that. He's a very nutty little kid, but that's where, wouldn't you be if that's how you started out? And so this is written by Aaron Jackson, who's a writer and a comedian. He's appeared in Broad City and Detour and Crashing and Funny or Die's Jared and Ivanka, and he dresses up apparently like Ivanka, and everybody thinks he's Ivanka. When he's on the street, people are like, Ivanka. It's crazy. Anyway, it's very charming. The comp is Candide is written by John Irving with a little Charles Dickens thrown in. A young innocent who finally finds his way in the world, because you can't stay in the theater for forever, and so he has to find his way. And so he tries, and he tries, and he fails, and he tries, and it's wonderful. It's lovely. It's The Astonishing Life of August March by Aaron Jackson.
All right, Catherine House by Elizabeth Thomas. This is a debut. Here's Elizabeth. This is from our Custom House imprint. They do a lot of interesting, smart nonfiction, and then also some really elevated literary genre fiction. Sarah Perry, if you read The Essex Serpent, they publish that novel and her subsequent ones. Catherine House is kind of like a gothic thriller with some speculative fiction mixed in. It's really smart, so think kind of like Rebecca, Wuthering Heights meets The Luckiest Girl Alive. That's kind of framing it. And it takes place in Catherine House, which is this fictional college where it's highly selective. Some of the brightest minds in our society have attended there, incredibly secretive. And students who go there, they dedicate 3 years of their lives to going to Catherine House. And that's 3 years, that's summer, they can't leave. 3 years at the Catherine House. And you follow this young woman who is attending, and she is there, she's smart naturally, but she's also there to kind of get to the social life of Catherine House. Because, even if people are, even if it is prestigious, they're still kids, essentially, so a lot of things happen. And this novel basically follows this woman as she discovers some of the secret societies within this already highly secretive school. This is inspired by Elizabeth's own experience. She studied at Yale and was part of a secret society. So again, has that mysterious speculative fiction mixed in about what's actually happening with this school behind the scenes, the leadership, what are they hiding, and also what are these students themselves hiding. It's really smart and interesting. This editor, who is also the editor for My Dark Vanessa, she edits Jane Kwok. She just buys really smart, fascinating books with really interesting female characters often at their core, and that's what you're getting with this. So we're really excited. It's coming May 12th. That's Catherine House by Elizabeth Thomas. All right, and I think it's more me? Yes. All right, You and Me and Us by Allison Hammer. This is a trade paperback. We're also doing a library hardcover edition. This is really great, smart, kind of elevated women's fiction that follows Alexis, who's kind of the breadwinner in her family. She's a workaholic. She has her own advertising agency, and she has no work-life balance at all. But Tommy, her partner, who is kind of like the stay-at-home dad in this situation, he is diagnosed with terminal cancer. And this story basically follows these two individuals and their daughter as they have to kind of completely reset their life and their expectations for what happens next. So again, it's a heartbreaker, but it's really warm, and the setting is fascinating. We're just really excited about Allison Hammer, very much fans of Marissa de los Santos. If any Marissa fans here, definitely for you. This is You and Me and Us, and it's coming April 7th.
Uh-oh.
I got you.
Okay. 82 Days on Okinawa, one American's unforgettable first-hand account of the Pacific War's greatest battle. Yes, I did say first-hand account. Art Shaw is 99 years old. If you go on the books page on Edelweiss, we just got this uploaded yesterday, there's a fantastic interview with him. He is so sharp, and he is just such a sweet, smart, incredible man, talking about the 82 days he spent on Okinawa. And in fact, he was the first American officer who made it ashore. He was a unit commander in the Army's 361st Artillery Battalion of the 96th Division. They were called the Deadeyes, and he was literally the first one ashore from that group. And so this is his story. I mean, it's incredibly powerful, but it's also it's beautiful. I mean, it talks about his wife. He talks about his whole life, really. But when you hear him, when you look at him, the man is sitting there and he's talking to Robert Wise, who interviewed him. What a gentle interviewer too. It's a beautiful interview. You really should listen to it, watch it, because he's just telling him what it was like. Yes, war is hell. Are you a hero? No, I'm not a hero. A hero is anybody who put this uniform on, regardless of Army, Air Force, Marines. Doesn't matter. Those in his mind were the heroes, not looking to take the credit, not looking for any of that, just telling the story of what he saw, and he lived, and he saw a lot. But it's very, very powerful. So 2020, talking before about the atomic bomb, marks the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Okinawa, which ran from April 1st to June 22nd. And this is his first-hand account, which will shatter you, because it's really something else. I could go into all the numbers, the numbers of people who died on both sides, but just it's got 20 black and white photos, and it's all the gallant men, Never Call Me a Hero, those kinds of books by that is a generation that is ebbing. So check it out. It's really quite powerful. And the author is Robert Wise is really wonderful with him. I really encourage you to watch the video. That's 82 Days in Okinawa.
Okay, next is The Only Child by Mie Seo. And this is a K-thriller. It's exciting. This is translated. It's really popular in Korea already, and we're excited to have it come over with us, with our Echo imprint. And it's very eerie, and I told you, I promised more serial killers in my fiction coming up, and this is another one. So it's a story of a criminal psychologist, and she studies people and all of, everything that entails. But then a serial killer calls from this prison, and he's done all of these gruesome murders, shook the world, and he wants to be interviewed, but only by her. A little creepy. And so she goes to that, but at the same time, while she's getting to know this person, her, in the same day actually, her husband's 11-year-old daughter from a previous marriage comes to live with her and shows up at their door after her grandparents, who she lived with after her mom passed away, die in a sudden fire. And a few things, she's starting to get to know this person she's interviewing, and a few things that he's describing in his life sound a little bit like what's going on at home. And she's trying to decide if this is just a coincidence or if that's going to turn into something. Psychological suspense, you get the two stories that happens a lot, but it's like putting them together and like just trope and it's so fun. It's like Mindhunter meets Silence of the Lambs, and it's so creepy, and I'm excited for this one. This one is on sale in February, so you don't have to wait very long, and that's The Only Child.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
So it is 1:40, and our author is here to speak. So I think what we'll do is maybe I'll wrap up with these two books here, and then we'll hear from our author. And I think maybe what we'll do, based on your time, because we said we would wrap up at 2, but Jeffrey Colvin needs to, you want to hear from him, believe me. So let me talk about these 2 books real quickly, and then we'll stop, and then we can always record the rest of these later. There's about, 5 or 6 left, but, we need to be respectful of everyone's time. So, okay, Creative Care. So these 2 books I'm going to talk about. Of course, the oldest one here is talking about the books about the old people, but that's okay. But they mean a lot to me, and I think that these are really, really important books for your library. Creative Care is by Ann Basting. This woman is from Wisconsin. She is a MacArthur Genius recipient, and she has, this book is rooted in 25 years of research, because she has pioneered this radical change in our approach to, and interactions with the elderly in our lives, especially people suffering from dementia. So memory loss, we all know dementia covers many things. She's thinking about memory loss. And she realized early on in her research that doing the typical thing where you're trying to, say, remember this, remember that, and they don't, nobody feels good after that. It's a terrible feeling. They're embarrassed, they're frustrated. It's not a way to communicate, not she's found a better way. She's found a way through creativity and improv and theater. And I have to tell you, this is a very effective book. I've spoken with another colleague of mine who has an elderly mother who is, and she said, this works. She does it through imagination and creativity by posing questions that will incite. There's no wrong answer. There isn't, there's no wrong answer. There's like, what gift would you give to a child if you could give your child anything? What was your favorite food, or what's your favorite smell? She talks about how she would take a picture of the old Marlboro Man, the cowboy, and she went to this group, and because she used to work in a nursing home, and that's when this all started a million years ago, and she started to see what worked and what didn't, and she held up the picture, and she said, who is this? And somebody said, oh, well, that's Fred. And she said, oh, okay, Fred who? And they said, it's Fred Astaire. And then this whole story, they just created this story about this image of this man who most of us would know, oh, that's the Marlboro Man. But so there's no wrong answer. And I don't have the time to deep dive, but I do suggest that you go online. She's got an organization called Time Slips, which I went online and was fascinated by this. There's 800 certified facilitators in creative engagement in 48 states and 20 countries, and it's growing and it's growing and it's growing, and it's training people how to approach the elderly and people with memory problems in a different, more effective way, and the results are amazing. I could watch her forever. She's absolutely amazing. So, Creative Care by Ann Basting. And then the next book I'm going to talk about is real. Okay, do we have that?
No, I'm
Get ready.
waiting. Ready?
Do it. Growing Old. I want to be her. How great is that? Oh, I forgot to put the picture up because oh well, that's Ann Basting. Okay. And Growing Old by Elizabeth Marshall Thomas is brilliant and wonderful. She was always will be an anthropologist, and so many books have been written about the aging experience by authors who aren't really that old. She's in her late 80s. That picture was taken at 88. She's sharp as ever, and she spent her whole life as an anthropologist, so she sees what aging as part of a natural order of things, and so it's very refreshing and inspiring and funny. I mean, some things aren't funny. She broke a hip. I mean, she's not sugarcoating this, but she is coming at it from a very different point of view and applies all of her her education and her experience. And she's the author of The Hidden Life of Dogs. She's a very wise woman, and so it's a very life-affirming account of the wisdom that comes with age. Again, I just went down the rabbit hole reading about her. There's a great article in Harvard Magazine about her. She's cool. She's smart, and she's practical, and she's wise, and I love her, and I love that. I mean, if that picture doesn't tell you everything. More to come on that, but that's Growing Old. I highly recommend you check her out. That's by Elizabeth Marshall Thomas. That's coming out in April. I'm going to talk about this book a lot between now and then. Notes on Aging with something like Grace. So let's stop now. As I say, whatever books we didn't cover, which aren't too many, but and some are sort of self-explanatory. Lainey, just go back for 1 second to Memorial Drive.
Oh, that
2
one.
seconds on
I don't know
Memorial
why it's-
Drive, if we can go back.
I don't know why it's not.
We
going.
have lead read every
Here, I have it.
that's not it.
It's just not
So-
my friend today. All right.
There we go. Okay,
There you go.
very quickly. Lead read every season. We pick one book that we feel is going to be the one that has that special something. It's going to resonate with readers of all ages and just appeal and connect. And this was just announced yesterday. This is our lead read for the summer. Do you want to do it? Bring it home.
No, it's hard to talk about it quickly because it's so amazing. It's nonfiction, and I read it, and I had to remind myself that I wasn't reading fiction. Lyrical, beautiful. It's written by a former U.S. poet laureate, and she's got poetry collections, and she won the Pulitzer Prize in Poetry, and it just shows through. she's originally from Mississippi, moved to Atlanta, where a lot of this happens. You get this Southern story in it as well. She's multiracial, so it's always in the background, but it's never, you know, center stage. And I always say that's hard to do well. And it all revolves around when she was 19. Her mother was killed by her former stepfather, and it's terrible. True and terrible, and you don't want to. I don't want to sound trite. I don't want to like skip over it because I don't want to squeeze it in. It's so lyrical. She just builds this suspense in a way, this tension about what's going to happen. And I thought I was reading fiction. I would be like, oh, this is a memoir, and it's heartbreaking, and it just says this larger narrative of race and violence in this community that she's in. But it's just. I could go on all day, but it's amazing.
It's so powerful, and the same thing, I read the manuscript and I thought this was nonfiction. That's how good it is. She has, well, she's a poet laureate. I mean, she's what away with words. She's just brilliant. It's a horrible story, but she just delivers it in a way that, and I think this is our first nonfiction for the lead read, right?
Yeah.
Right?
It is.
Yeah, so that says a lot. You know, our lead read has always been fiction, but I'm telling you, everybody that read this just went, whoa. So I'm sorry that we missed out on the others, but wanted you to know about that. We're around. We'll be talking about stuff on Facebook, but now we're going to bring Jeffrey Colvin to you to talk about Africaville. And so, and Facebook, I guess, are we done? Oh, no, we're not done because he's going to, yeah.
Oh, he's using his headset.
Okay, so let us go and get Mr. Colvin. Hello.
I'm trying to think how this works. Hi, Jeff. Nice to meet you, Chris. Thanks for coming.
So, do you prefer to sit? Oh, because we're going to get you on the camera there. Okay. So, here. And
All right.
sit you there.
Thank you.
And we have the keeper of the clicker. Chris, you have the.
Yes, so here's the clicker. Do you want to click or I can click, whatever you prefer?
Can you click?
Yeah, I'm happy to click. Yeah.
So, would you like a glass of water?
I have a.
Okay.
All right. I also print it off your size because people online can see them, and just ignore me otherwise.
I'll take this one.
I'm going to leave you.
Okay.
Do you have space?
Okay.
You can call me Sherry.
So everyone, I'd like to introduce Tracy Sherrod to you from our Amistad imprint, who's going to introduce you to Jeffrey Colvin.
Thank you, Virginia. I think the greatest fantasy of all editors, and I think they tell you this every time they see you, right? That to be in a room with librarians is like we've died and gone to heaven. Thank you for everything. And so I'm pleased to introduce Jeffrey Colvin. Jeffrey was born and raised in Alabama and has spent 2 decades writing short fiction and essays that explore the African American experience in America. Before moving to New York, to enroll in an MFA program at Columbia, he served in the United States Marine Corps, worked as an advertising analyst, congressional aide, and nonprofit manager. He spent nearly 20 years on the research and writing of his debut novel, Africaville, which he's here to share with you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tracy. And I'd also like to thank all of the staff here at HarperCollins. They've been very good at helping me prepare for the presentation. As she said, this is my debut novel, and really the first time I've entered into this. Writers are usually in a little cubby writing away and not out with such a huge audience. So I'm very happy to be here, and thank you all for inviting me. To begin, one question I often get is, you are a young man from Alabama. How did you come to write a novel about Canada? One answer is, of course, that my novel Africaville is about more than Canada. One of the things we like to say about it is Africaville chronicles 3 generations of the Seaboat family: Kathella, her son Etienne, and his son Warner, as their lives unfold against the tumultuous events of the 20th century. It takes readers from Nova Scotia to Montreal to New England and down to the Deep South. Along the way, it explores notions of passing, cross-racial relationships, and the meaning of home. The novel also presents the events, tumultuous events in the birth, growth, maturity of a small Nova Scotia community. Since Africaville is based on a real town, I did a lot of research, and I'm going to share just a little bit of that with you here today. I want to start with this picture of Alabama, which is this so-called Black Belt region of Alabama. It's a place that has, for one thing, a large proportion of black residents. But this region is also the site of a number of, which you probably already know, civil rights marches and protests for voting rights in the 1960s. One of these marches is the Selma to Montgomery March of 1965. That one's well known. The one on the right, however, caught my attention as well. It shows a group of people along the march. And seeing that photograph, I began to wonder about these people who live in the rural areas along the march from Selma to Montgomery. Did they participate? And if so, why? If they didn't participate, why didn't they? I happen to have a very close connection to rural Alabama. My grandmother raised a family in rural Alabama. When I left to go off to college, she moved away from the community. But when I came home on leave from the Marine Corps one summer, I learned that the community had been razed, torn down, and all the people gone. But subsequent to that, I listened to some of the stories the neighbors told about their former community. Some of their stories were happy stories, the people who dressed the best for church, the weddings that folks talked about for years, the small schoolhouse where the teacher's performance was more theater than lecture. Then there were stories about how the community ended. And these were difficult stories about the young men and women who could not find jobs once the mines had closed. In the late 1990s, I began to write a series of short stories about rural communities on the verge of extinction. But I did not see any of these stories as being part of a larger narrative until I read an article in the New York Times in 2001 about a small Nova Scotia community just north of Halifax, Nova Scotia. Okay. The town was called Africville, and it came into the news in the 1960s. It had been formed earlier than this, but it came to prominence in the news in the 1960s when, over the objection of the residents, the city of Halifax decided to bulldoze the community and move the residents out to make way for a bridge. Here you'll see a picture of the community, a picture of the people looking at the houses that are going to be demolished, and then finally you'll see a picture of the bridge that was there after the community was gone. I thought about this community for a while. And one of the things I thought about was the fact that the residents fought long and hard not to be removed from their community. And then for decades, they continued to fight the city for restitution for being moved. Now, I learned in 2010 that the mayor of Halifax actually did apologize to the citizens and their descendants of Africville for having destroyed the community. Yet and still, the residents continue to fight today for full amends for their homes having been destroyed. So I set aside the article, but I couldn't stop thinking about this community. I wondered about the people who had come up to Nova Scotia from the U.S. and from and the Caribbean, either by force to escape slavery, unaware of what was in store for them. I had also read that some of the people from the community had gone on to Sierra Leone, Africa. What happened to them? Most importantly, though, I thought about how vociferously the residents had protested being removed from their community. So even before I began to do research, I thought, this is a town that could definitely be the source of a novel. Now, I consulted numerous articles, books, and films about Africville. However, I thought that for a novel, I wanted to look at, none of them had explored how the pull of a town like Africville might affect several generations of one family. I also suspected that there were some deep connections between Africville and the story of those small rural communities I was writing about in Alabama. I wanted my fictional village to have the same sounds and smells of Africville, and I wanted it to be filled with the same rich characters. But for that, I needed to do a little bit more research about how they had come to Canada. A question for the audience. How many of you know about the New York Times series called 1619? I'm sure you probably all do. It's about, it commemorates the arrival of the first enslaved Africans onto the shores of America. Well, the arrival of blacks in Canada also begins in the 1600s. The man on the left there, little is known about him, but his name is Matthew de Costa. That's what he sort of goes by. And he arrived in Canada in the 1600s. You see two pictures of an artist's rendering of him. The man on the right also arrived in Canada around 1600. His name is Lejeune, and he was captured in Madagascar as a boy and brought to Canada around 1628. Now, those were the earliest arrivals in Canada. The 1700s, though, was the time in which a large influx of people began to come to Canada. And the woman in the middle is an example of that. Her name is Chloe Cooley, and she lived in Ontario. And her attempt to escape from her captor in the late 1700s led to the first anti-slavery law in Canada. In writing about Canada, my community had three main sources, and this mirrored somewhat the people who lived in the actual village of Africville. So in Africville, we have the people came up to Canada as a result of war, the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812. They also came up in the Underground Railroad, and then a large group came up from Jamaica, the so-called Jamaican Maroons. The first settlers that came up in and around the Revolutionary War came up with the white loyalists who did not support America's desire to leave Britain. And so they brought their slaves with them. A lot of them settled in the province of Quebec, in that area, and but a lot of them also went to Nova Scotia. So this group became part of my village of Africville. Okay. But the largest number of blacks came to Canada during the War of 1812. Now, during the Revolutionary War, there were a number of proclamations issued by military leaders and also governors telling slaves, free your captors, join with us, and then we'll take you off to freedom. These occurred during the Revolutionary War, but the most prominent proclamation was issued during the War of 1812. You'll see that there on the left. I'll read you a little portion of the proclamation. All persons who may be disposed to migrate from the United States will, with their families, be received on board of His Majesty's ships or vessels of war or at the military posts. They will have their choice of either entering into His Majesty's sea or land forces or of being sent as free settlers to the British possessions in North America or the West Indies, where they will meet with due encouragement. Given under my hand at Bermuda this 2nd day of April 1814 by command of Vice Admiral Alexander Cochrane. The picture on the right is the man who left Maryland during this period, around the War of 1812. He and several thousand other blacks turned out to be part of the largest group emancipation of blacks prior to the Civil War. Some of these immigrants landed in Halifax and also became part of the village of Africaville. The second group that came up with the Underground Railroad. I'm sure you're all familiar with this, so I'll touch on it briefly. By the estimates of how many people came up to Canada on the Underground Railroad vary, but between 80 and 100,000 is one figure that's thrown around a lot. Of these, about a third went on to Canada. Again, most of them settled in the Quebec, Ontario area, but some of them did wind up in Nova Scotia, and thus those people also became a part of the fictional community of Africaville. Okay. And finally, the largest group of immigrants that made up the fictional village of Africaville arrived in July of 1796. 3 ships, the Dover, the Mary, and the Anne, landed in Halifax Harbor carrying approximately 600 men, women, and children. They came from the tropical highlands of Trelawney, Jamaica. Now, they had lived there as a community of freed blacks. In Jamaica, some of the blacks, ran off from their plantations, and the British allowed them to live in these small communities. There were a number of them in Jamaica. This was one called the Trelawney Jamaicans. Well, in the previous year, 1795, the governor of Jamaica decided that the Trelawney Maroons were plotting an insurrection. And so they were rounded up, placed on a ship, and shipped off to Halifax. So the interesting thing about this group of immigrants is that out of this group came the matriarch of the Seaboat family, one of the main family of my novel. So, and I wondered about her a lot. Kath Ella was her name. She was an immigrant. She was a descendant of the immigrants from Jamaica. What was she like? What were her hopes and fears, all those things? And with whom did she have a child to start the next generation? In thinking about the man with whom Kath Ella had a child, I could have used people who came up with the Underground Railroad, people who came up during the wars, and also people who came up over on the ships with the Jamaicans. But I decided to move with another little-known fact about blacks moving to Canada. And that is, in the early 1900s, a number of blacks came into Canada, not around Halifax, but way up in Cape Breton. And these blacks came up to Canada principally to work in the mines. And most of them came from the West Indies, but a few did come from the southern United States. And thus, that man, a descendant of those immigrants, is the person with whom Kath Ella had a son, Etienne. The next question was what was her relationship to this community, Kath Ella, And also, what about the subsequent generations? What was their relationship to this mythical village called Africaville? The short answer is Kath Ella moved with her son Etienne to Montreal. Her son Etienne later moves to Vermont and then to Alabama, where his son Warner is born. Now, I knew what might pull these generations to Africaville: its unique history, the continued efforts by the former residents to keep the community alive, but what would cause the subsequent generations to distance themselves from Africaville? Okay. Okay, that's the slide of the, okay. This shows you a little bit of how difficult it was to work in the coal mines of Cape Breton. And this slide also shows one of the communities up in Cape Breton. Glass Bay was one of the areas where some of the residents lived. Okay. And so the question becomes, what might cause some of the subsequent generations to distance themselves from Africaville? One of the issues is Cathella moves to Montreal. Her son and her grandson wound up in the South. Etienne, her son, the second generation, uses his ability to pass to distance himself from Africaville. Now, passing, obviously, as you all know, is when someone light enough, a black person, a person considered black by society, is light enough to be considered white, and they decide to pass as such. So Cathella's son, Etienne, decides to pass for white. This decision leads to a lot of internal turmoil, and that's one of the conflicts of the story, his story. Warner's son, Etienne's son, Warner, learns that he has a black grandmother later in life, and he attempts to try to reconnect with some of the relatives and the residents of Africaville, and that becomes one of the central conflicts of his story. So the story of the three generations of the Seabolt family, that is the flesh and blood of the novel. Its spine is the dramatic tale of the beginning, maturity, ending, and in some ways the transcendence of the village of Africaville. I'll close by reading, I'll give you all a sneak preview of one of the things we're considering for, let me talk about this first. Nella Larson's, one of the covers for Nella Larson's book was this picture by a African-American artist called Palmer Hayden. And one of the things that struck me about the picture is, you can see here, there's a woman standing here looking out. And I sort of read it as she's afraid that the other black woman in the picture might see her and out her as passing for white. As you know, this could be very dangerous in the 20s and 30s for people. It could lead to them being ostracized at best, and even bodily harm at worst. And so, and looking at the picture, I began to I could almost feel the terror that the woman has of being outed as a black person. So I'll close by giving you a sneak peek, you heard it here first, of one of the quotes that we may use for the epigraph for Africaville. And it says, there is no moral distance between the facts of life in San Francisco and the facts of life in Birmingham. For this quote, it might be said that Baldwin is looking from Alabama west toward California. My novel began with me looking from Alabama north toward Nova Scotia. But I believe Baldwin and I came to the same conclusion, that we are all strongly connected. That in my writing a novel about Canada, I was also writing a novel that was also very close to home. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Thank you. Come back, you guys. Thank you. That was so fantastic. I hope you'll stay. Can you sign? Can you sign galleys? Oh, great. So we have galleys for everybody. If you'd like Jeffrey to sign one for you, he would be happy to do that. I guess you could even do that here if you want to. Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
We're
sure.
done. We're done. And so we'll sign off with Facebook and tell you all thank you so much for logging on, for listening to our books. We did miss a few, but we'll record them and put them on Facebook Live, and we'll send you all a heads up when we're going to have that ready for you, because we don't want to miss out on those. So thank you all for joining on Facebook, and Toodles.